Welcome to LifeBlood. This is George G, and the time is right. Welcome to today's guest, strong and powerful David Richman. David, are you ready to do this?
I am, George. Thank you.
Excited to have you on. David is the author of Cycle of Lives, 15 People's Stories, 5,000 Miles, and a Journey Through the Emotional Chaos of Cancer. David, tell us a little bit about your personal life, some more about your work, and why you do what you do.
Sure. So my personal life is involved around all the stuff that everybody else is, trying to keep as much on our plate and get as much off our plate as possible. But I do endurance athletics, which I picked up in my late 30s, actually. I was an overweight smoker, pretty unhappy, didn't really take care of myself or my own needs. I had young kids, 4-year-old twins, and it was in a horrible relationship, and said, oh man, I got to get us out. And when I did, I happened to walk by a mirror where I saw my reflection, and I'm like, dude, like, who are you? And I just didn't have the answer. And so I embarked on this journey of putting down the cigarettes, starting to eat healthy, and starting to do running. And then that led to doing Ironmans and 100-mile runs, 500-mile bike rides, and all this crazy stuff. And then in reflection of that, at that same downtime in my life, my sister was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And I was drawn to this idea. I'm a writer, and I was drawn to this idea when I saw what she and others were going through. Maybe not her so much. She was pretty open and able to talk, but I noticed that people were really good about talking about the tasks around their trauma, but they weren't real good about talking about the feelings. And everybody I spoke to, George, had some kind of level of, oh, I wish I would have said this, or I wish I would have the freedom to do this, or I don't know what to say, or oh, like around the emotional side of it. And so that's what drew me to write this book.
Wow, that is quite a story. So quitting smoking is no small feat. I did it years ago.
Yeah.
How long did you smoke for before you quit?
Well, we can talk in time or cigarettes, but it was about 250,000 cigarettes and about 20 years. So yeah, it was pretty bad. And, I don't know about you, but I heard 100 times, you got to quit. And I told myself 100 times, you got to quit. But it was like one thing that I didn't, like, inherently, I just didn't want to fail at quitting. And so I never tried to quit, because I felt like, dude, if you fail at this, then it's over. Like I knew I had to quit, but I didn't want to quit, and I didn't want to fail at quitting, like quit, start, quit, start, quit, start. And then during that time, my sister was going through her brain cancer. I have twins. My daughter said to me, she must have heard, in kindergarten or something, that smoking causes cancer, and June has cancer, so she's going to die, so you're going to die. So she said, Dad, we quit smoking. And I'm like, wow, that's the first time I really heard it. And so yeah, so then I did it. It was hard. But the second I quit, I never had another cigarette.
Amazing. It's fascinating to me to try to figure out why and how we as human beings decide to actually make change. And you did it in a couple of different regards, right? You quit smoking, you started eating healthy, you started exercising, and you went from being, I don't know if you were sedentary or not, I'm sort of guessing that you were, to the absolute David Goggins opposite.
Yeah. I mean, not that crazy. I've done some crazy stuff. I've run, 25 hours straight, 4 marathons. I've done, nearly a 5,000-mile solo bike ride in only 45 days. I've done some pretty crazy stuff, but one of my book participants, a guy, his story is crazy. I won't go into it right now, but he has this great way of explaining how in 1 second he was able to change almost everything about his perspective, his personality, his oneness with himself, with the world. When he met this woman, and he said, it was like I put on a new pair of glasses. And it was like, I mean, oh my God, right? If you just see things just the tiniest bit more in focus, things change just a little bit, it can change the world. And so for me, that little change was all of these factors that happened at that one time, and then really taking an honest look in the mirror and saying, like, who are you? Like, because we're pretty good at fooling ourselves. Oh, I'll eat better when I'll reduce my stress when life gets easier. I'll be better friend when I'm not so busy at work. We're really good at fooling ourselves, and I was a master at it. And so when I just took an honest look, I just went, man, you got some good stuff about you, keep that. You got some bad stuff about you, you need to work on it.
I love it. So much powerful stuff. Keep the good, get rid of the bad.
Yeah. and
So,
and yeah, no, sorry to interrupt you, George. I'm just saying, like if you are able to take an honest look at yourself and go, like, look, man, you're kind of wasting your potential. You're wasting who you want to become or who you could become. Then for me, and I'm sure what might resonate with people, I needed to, like, forgive myself and free my mind a little bit, because I've run into times in my life, and I certainly have seen others run into a time in their life where they come to the realization about who they are and where they're at in life. And that's the point that they give up trying to change, because it's already too late. They already feel guilty. They're burdened by their past. They got a chip on their shoulder. They already know the outcome, or whatever the reason is. And I just said, dude, just forgive yourself for not being who you want it to be, where you want to be. You don't even know. Just go figure it out, find out, but do it with a free mind. And that was the key for me. It was like those two things, like being super honest and authentic with myself, and then saying, okay, just like, it's okay, move on. You're good now. You could go start again.
that is powerful, David. Is How does that tie it strikes me that there's a tie in there when you were talking about focusing on tasks versus actually addressing the feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. And for a guy who, and a lot of guys are like this, most people are like this, I think. I wrote a different book about it, that we grow up going, okay, I got to be XYZ to make my parents happy, or to my teacher, or I got to do this so my boss will hire me or give me a promotion, or we do all these things for other people, right? So we're really good, especially if you're a pleaser, especially if you're like wanting to fix things. And in my case, everything but myself, right? You're really good at the tasks, right? But when do we just step back and look in the mirror? And looking in the mirror is oftentimes, I'm using that as an analogy now, but like when I have a heartfelt, meaningful conversation with you, with somebody close to me, that's kind of like settling down, looking in the mirror, being real, interacting in a positive way, right? Like nothing's off the table. There's no BS involved. Like, let's just be real. And that's hard. It's hard to do. It's really, really hard to do, and that's where you start to deal with feelings.
It requires immense courage by you as an individual to do that, and then also, I imagine, and it does, to make yourself vulnerable, and I guess maybe that's the term, to engage in that conversation with somebody else. And like going back
Yeah.
to your sister, being able to, I don't know why I'm trying to put words in your mouth.
Yeah. No, no, no. Listen, you're absolutely right. And the thing is there's this concept of Sonder. I don't know if you're familiar with the word Sonder. I wasn't,
Mm.
for most of my life, but Sonder is this thought that we are all just passerbyers in each other's lives, which is unbelievably fascinating, right? Because man, would I beat myself up for disappointing someone or thinking that somebody didn't think good of me, right? Boy, did I beat myself up. But I could care less what I thought about me. And so when you know when you do connect in a way that says I'm going to be authentic, it really only matters who I am, because George, we're just passerbyers, right? You and your listeners, you and me, most of the people we run into our lives, it's your life, you're living it. I'm not living it. And that's really, I just learned that also through writing the book about cancer, right? Is that people don't want sympathy. They don't want to hear that you're sorry, because it's not your life, man. You didn't have anything to do with them losing their grandma or them going through a difficult time at work. That's not, you have nothing to do with it. Don't be sorry about it. Just, and don't feel bad for them, right? Just empathize with them, connect with them. And that's hard. It's so hard to do, but it's so, like I said earlier, it's like if you could just focus on that one thing, like that honest, authentic connection with yourself, with other people. It's a hard place to go to, but once you do, man, it's an easy place to refine every minute.
I love it. We do care a lot about what other people think of us, even though we may never interact with them ever again. And
Yeah.
we care so little about ourselves and taking care of ourselves. And I wrote down that you've got to run your own race. And I think
Yeah.
that there's wordplay
Yes.
there, because you run 5,000 miles or whatever, and
Yeah.
focus on that.
Yeah, that was so. Let me tell you a super quick story. Okay. My very first half Ironman that I was going to do, I was still overweight. Obviously, I quit smoking. I got to the point where I thought I could do a half Ironman, which is, for anybody listening, a 1.2-mile swim, 56-mile bike, and then a half marathon. And I had never done any of those distances on my own individually, right? And I go up there and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm this endurance athlete and whatever, and I'm working on myself. And I get to the race, and at the start, they're doing a wave start, and it's like the 35 to 39-year-old men or something are doing the wave start, and every single one of them looks like a Greek god. And I'm like, what the hell am I even doing here? Like, these guys are athletes, man. I mean, look at me. What the hell? I'm getting out of here. And,
Hmm.
and I don't belong in this group, right? And all of a sudden the gun goes off, and one dude falls on his back and he started doggy paddling backwards. And another guy starts swimming in circles. And another guy swims to the edge of the river and kind of like catches his breath. And I'm like, oh man, I could swim better than those guys. Like, they don't seem to care like that anybody's watching them. Because if they did, man, they would not be out here, right?
Yeah.
Who swims on their back on doggy paddle at a half Ironman? Especially when they look like a Greek god. And then it hit me like, dude, run your own race, man. Like, you're here for you. Nobody's paying you, right? Nobody cares. Nobody's watching. Just do what you do. Run your race. I love that saying that you just gave us. Yeah. So I was just like, who cares, man? Nobody's watching. Nobody cares. That's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing. Run your own race.
And it strikes me, I was just thinking about that this morning. I was thinking about how probably a lot of the most successful people, it was in the context of somebody who moved here from another country that does not enjoy the same freedoms as ours, and
Mhm.
immediately they recognized the opportunity and they started taking advantage of it. And I thought, this person doesn't care what anybody thinks. They are seizing the opportunity and pursuing the life that they want, versus me. I'm guilty of, oh geez, I wonder what that person thinks about me, and if I do this, geez, what will people's perceptions be? It's like, what a waste of time.
It's a waste of time, and there's a fine line, right, between being self-aware and being self-caring and
Hmm.
maybe being selfish or self-centered. Like, as long as you're doing things ethically, as long as you have intention. And I know that doesn't resonate with everybody, because if you do something bad and you explain it away as, oh, I didn't intend to do that, well, okay, that's bullshit. But if you do things with good intention, and you do things from a heart-centered, authentic, above the line kind of, you know, origination point, then doing it for yourself is great. Like, I used to tell my kids, they're like, oh, all of our friends come over and you cook us dinner. You don't have to do that. And I go, yeah, you're right. I don't have to. I get to do it. Like it's not a have to. Like I'm doing it for me. I know that you like it, but I'm doing it because it's what I like. And so that's the kind of self-care, I do. And I still am guilty. Who's not? Of wondering like what's that person think or what's that person think. But where I used to have that as the only part in the equation, maybe that's less of a factor. And more of a factor is what do I think? And it's a really wonderful place to be because then you can learn. You can learn about yourself and what you're doing and where you belong in the world. And honestly, I mean, George, if we are just passerbyers in everybody's life, why the heck do we care what anybody thinks?
Hmm. Right?
Tell you what, Michael Jordan doesn't care what people think.
No.
Oprah Winfrey doesn't. Elon Musk doesn't. They could care less what anybody thinks. Why? Because they're just living their lives, man. They're 100% tuned into what they want, which is great because they do a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Made me think as you were talking about the process of quitting smoking, and you were reticent, nervous, afraid to do it because you didn't want to fail at it.
Mhm.
And so I know that when I recognize I'm concerned about what other people think about me, I don't beat myself up and say, geez, I just need to go from caring about what other people think to no longer caring. And if I
Right.
find myself doing it, then I'm going to beat myself up because I'm not perfect. And I
Yeah.
imagine it's like everything else that we've been talking about. You just need to start doing it and you'll get better at it.
You do. I mean, look, when the very first run that I went on, George, was I wanted to learn how to run. So I actually hired a running coach. And I said, "Hey, let's go for a run." He goes, "Yeah, meet me on the Strand in Santa Monica. We'll go for a mile run, and I'll check out your gait and see how you do." I couldn't run 2 minutes at a 12-minute pace.
Hmm.
I literally I stopped and I sat on the curb. Like he goes, "Wow." He goes, "Wow, are you out of shape?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I couldn't." I mean, I couldn't run 2 minutes. But then you learn, right? Then I ran 2 minutes, and then I ran 4 minutes, and then I ran a mile. And then a few weeks later, I ran 3 miles, and you just figure it out. Now, when I go out for like a 4 or 5 mile run, I'm like, oh, you barely went for a run. And all of a sudden, like just, how many years ago, I could run 2 minutes. And now I can run 50 miles.
Hmm.
It's like, but it takes time, right? And it's that same thing. Like I didn't all of a sudden go, I'm a Mr. Fixer, wannabe fixer, care about what everybody thinks to the next day going, I don't care what anybody thinks. It's not that easy, um, but that self-talk helps. That true, authentic look in the mirror, honest with yourself, self-talk really, really helps you kind of bridge the gap between there and here a little bit faster because it's hard to lie to yourself when you're looking in the mirror and saying, whoa, dude, what's up? You know?
Love it. Well, you've already given us a bunch, David, but people are ready for that difference making tip. What do you have for them?
uh, can I tell it to you in a super quick story?
Of course.
So I did this 87-mile rollerblade race. Okay, imagine that, George, on a rollerblade, especially a guy that's not very coordinated. It went from Athens, Georgia to Atlanta, Georgia. And I had no business being out there. It was ridiculous. And it was so hard. And about 30 miles in, and this is kind of at the very beginning of my journey into endurance athletics. And about 30 miles in, I'm hitting the wall. My legs are done. I'm totally dehydrated. I'm 100% toast. I'm in uncharted waters. I've never been anywhere near as far down the road of pushing myself ever, nowhere near physically in my life. And I stop and I lean over and I'm like, I turn myself, parallel or perpendicular to the hill because otherwise I'd slide back down. And I look and there's the sag wagon, the wagon that picks up the stragglers that aren't going to make it to the finish line. And I go, man, I don't want to do that because if I don't go any further, I'm going to know what my limit is. I'm going to know everything about myself.
Hmm.
And I said, man, please, you got to figure something out. And I see this line on the ground that's from my sweat. And I go, well, if you could just cross the line, you're going to be in new territory. Like you're going to learn something. And then if you could do another step, you're going to learn something and another step. So it's not really about like accomplishing your goal. It's about learning. And I said, wow, man, all right. So if I don't make it, that's cool. But every step I take, I'm going to learn something. And so I used that to power me that day. And I figured out a way to get to the finish line about 6.5 hours later. And I was complete toast at the end. That's an understatement. I got sick. It was horrible. But at least I learned all this stuff. So every time that I run into a difficulty along whatever stretch, work, personal life, professional life, writing, writer's block, an athletic event, whatever, and I hit the roof. I'm done. I go, man, can you figure out what you can learn if you could just go a little bit harder? And sometimes you can't, but you learn that too. But you just go, and so before I used to say, I got to accomplish this, which is a different driver than I want to learn. I want to seek. I want to find stuff out. I want to learn rather than I need to get somewhere. And so I don't know. That'd be my tip. That's what I use. I use that visual in my head of, just figure out a way to take one more step. So that's my little driver.
Well, I think that is great stuff. That definitely gets a come on. I think that's incredible. And it's so true. Just take that next step. If I get over this little line of sweat, that is maybe the last sweat inside my body. If I can get over that,
I might have been. Yeah. And sometimes you got to give up, right? So sometimes you got to know when to quit, but also maybe, especially if you're doing things for yourself, we couldn't quit on ourselves a little too easy. And yeah, it's been a wonderful learning journey for sure.
These stories that are in our heads, and whether they're true or we're just telling them ourselves and they're absolutely not true, but that you're feeling like you're going to be a failure if you didn't make smoking. And if I stop this rollerblade race right now, it's going to be the story of my rest of my life, because I know that's it. I mean, and it could have been, they both could have been true because you pushed past both of them. But it's fascinating what we do between our ears.
Yeah, it really is. And yeah. And the crazy thing is it doesn't have to be whatever way it is, right?
Right.
It could be whatever way you want it to be, but man, we're just not wired to know that. At least I wasn't smart enough to know that. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that are going, yeah, no, yeah, who doesn't know this stuff, right? But I didn't know it, right? So I'm glad I found out, even if it was a little later in life.
I think it's so valuable just to hear people talking about it. So, because we don't know unless we engage and explore these things. So I appreciate you being the person that you are, and sharing and writing and expressing yourself, and keep taking those next steps. So
sure.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, David. Where can people learn more about you? How can they engage with you?
Oh, well, thank you for that. The latest book, this Cycle of Lives, all the proceeds go to the cancer organizations that were chosen by the 15 book participants. So great cancer organizations around the country. They're listed in the book, listed on my website. I do expressive writing workshops for cancer organizations and other trauma organizations to try to help people deal with their the emotional self-talk and deal with that issue we just finished up on, which is what's in between our ears. And they can find the book wherever books are sold. The Audible just came out, which is awesome. I had 15 different actors each do one of the 15 people in the story. So wherever books are sold, it's Cycle of Lives, and you can find me, David Richman, all over that thing called the internet. And if you're interested, they're very inspiring, uplifting, evocative stories that we can all learn from. And I think if you read it, you'll learn from the people who were so courageous in telling their story, and with the hopes of empowering people like you and I to have the tools to start really hard conversations. And so if that rings a bell with you, then go buy the book and know that the proceeds are going to help people going through a struggle.
Well said. If you enjoyed this as much as I did, show David your appreciation and share today's show with a friend who also appreciates good ideas. Pick up a copy of Cycle of Lives wherever you buy your books, and find David on social media and all over the internet. I'll list all those places in the notes of the show. Thanks again, David.
You're welcome, George.
And until next time, keep fighting the good fight, as we are all in this together.